The studio lights dimmed one by one until only a thin beam of white light hovered above the stage. The audience grew quiet, sensing something unusual was about to happen. Moments later, a figure walked out, not confidently, not shyly, but with a strange, silent purpose. His hood was pulled low over his face, concealing every detail except the sharp curve of his jawline. He stopped right at the center, feet apart, hands loosely hanging by his sides. The room suddenly felt colder. Simon Cowell leaned back, squinting, trying to catch any hint of who the performer might be. The judges exchanged curious glances. "That's new," Heidi whispered. Even Sophia leaned forward, elbows on the table, her eyes scanning every inch of the mysterious figure. The camera zoomed in, but even then, no one could identify him. He radiated mystery like a fog that refused to lift. The audience began murmuring, some trying to guess, others already recording the moment on their phones. But the performer didn't flinch, didn't move at all. It was as if he existed in his own world, untouched by noise, fear, or expectation. The silence grew heavy, stretching longer than normal. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even the producers backstage felt tension tightening around them. What made it stranger was the look in the performer's stance, determined, but almost grieving. The air felt thick, saturated with an emotion no one could name. Something deep, heavy, and ancient seemed to sit on his shoulders. And then, very slowly, he lifted his head toward the judges, though his face was still hidden by shadow. Simon's expression changed instantly. The intensity in that motion, the power in that simplicity, it was enough to send a ripple of energy through the room. No one knew who he was. But in that moment, everyone knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. The moment the judges signaled that he could begin, the performer reached for the microphone. His fingers trembled, not with nervousness, but something deeper, something unresolved. As soon as he touched it, the sound system crackled. A faint pop echoed through the speakers, creating ripples of confusion across the room. Producers rushed to their stations, technicians peered into their screens, and the crew backstage exchanged frantic looks. "Is his mic broken?" someone hissed. "Do we stop? Do we restart?" But the judges waited. The performer kept his head down, shoulders rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. The lights flickered, just slightly, but enough to draw gasps. The audience felt the shift. Something was happening that didn't feel like a normal technical issue. The performer's stillness, the mic glitch, the atmosphere, it all blended together into a tension that wrapped around the entire studio. Simon leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "He's fighting something," he whispered, almost to himself. Even he didn't know whether he meant a technical problem or an emotional one. The performer took a step back, then forward again, as if grounding himself. The tension was becoming unbearable, even the camera zoomed in to catch the smallest movement of his hands and breath. A murmur spread through the crowd. Was the performance collapsing before it began? Was the contestant having stage fright? Was this some kind of dramatic build-up? No one could tell. The confusion blended with anticipation until the line between the two blurred completely. Then, without warning, the performer lifted his head, but still didn't reveal his face. The studio lights shook slightly as if sensing the shift. He opened his mouth to sing. But no sound came out. Instead, the mic hissed, then popped again. For a split second, it looked like the entire performance would fall apart. But deep inside the performer's posture, there was something unbreakable. Something preparing to rise. And Simon felt it too. This wasn't the start of a failure. It was the birth of a moment. Just when the silence reached its breaking point, the performer exhaled, a long, slow breath that carried far more weight than a simple inhale of air. He reached up, and with deliberate slowness, pulled back his hood. The crowd gasped. A scar, long and pale, ran down the side of his cheek. His eyes were sharp and filled with an emotional fire that made the entire room freeze. This wasn't the face of an ordinary singer. It was the face of someone who had endured storms most people never face in a lifetime. Before anyone could recover, he stepped into the spotlight, revealing himself fully. His clothes were simple, his body language strangely disciplined, almost soldier-like. But the most striking thing was the expression in his eyes, pain, loss, determination, all swirling together in a storm of emotion. He lifted the mic again. And this time, when he opened his mouth, the note that escaped was unlike anything the show had ever heard. It wasn't just powerful, it was raw, cracked open, filled with a depth of emotion that made even the judges straighten up. The speakers, which had been glitching, suddenly snapped into perfect clarity, as if the force of his voice had shocked them back to life. The note rose higher, breaking through the air like lightning. Gasps echoed across the arena. People clutched their chests. A woman in the audience covered her mouth with trembling hands. Others held their breath, afraid to blink. The performer wasn't just singing. He was releasing something that had been locked inside him for years. A memory. A promise. A wound. With every rising note, he pulled the entire room into his past, its heartbreak, its beauty, its tragedy. And just when everyone thought they understood him, he changed the melody. A sudden switch. A new harmony. A twist in the story he was telling through his voice. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a revelation. The performer's voice surged into a new intensity, carrying with it emotions so heavy they practically vibrated across the room. The lighting crew, caught between awe and confusion, lifted the stage lights automatically, creating a dramatic halo behind him. Every shadow danced like it was alive. The melody climbed, higher, stronger, impossibly powerful. The kind of note only someone who had lived through unbelievable suffering could produce. Every second, his voice tore through the arena like a storm ripping through silence. The audience rose to their feet as if pulled by gravity itself. People were crying without even realizing it. Some clapped mid-performance, unable to contain what they felt. The energy in the room didn't just rise, it exploded. Simon Cowell, the man known for his unshakable composure, didn't move at first. His expression shifted from curious, to astonished, to something far more vulnerable. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes widened. And then, as the performer held a note that felt impossibly long and impossibly deep, Simon slowly placed his hand over his mouth. It wasn't just shock. It was emotion. Real emotion. The kind that can't be faked, staged, or controlled. His other hand gripped the desk as if he needed something solid to hold on to. It was the first time in years he looked genuinely overwhelmed. The performer stepped forward, pouring his entire soul into the final stretch of the song. The floor vibrated. The stage lights shimmered. Even the cameras struggled to stay steady. It was as if the entire arena was reacting physically to his voice. The climax hit, one final, breathtaking high note that stretched across the universe of silence, echoing into every heart in the room. And when he stopped, the silence that followed was heavier than the song itself. Then the crowd erupted. A thunderstorm of applause, cheers, shouts, tears. But Simon sat still, staring at the performer like he had just witnessed the impossible. Because he had as the applause thundered across the arena, the performer didn't take a bow. He didn't smile. Instead, he looked down at the floor, breathing heavily, as if he had just climbed a mountain with only his voice and grief as companions. Simon finally found his voice. "Who are you?" he asked softly. The performer looked up. His eyes glistened, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. Something sacred. "My name doesn't matter," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "But I need to tell you why I'm here." The entire room leaned in. Even the cameramen held their breath. He continued, "I had a younger sister. She loved this show more than anything in the world. She dreamed of standing here, in this very spot. His voice trembled slightly. But she never got the chance. The audience froze, hearts tightening. She passed away last year, he said. And the song I sang tonight was hers. She wrote it. She believed it would change the world someday. I promised her I would bring it here. I promised I would let her voice live. The silence was so deep, it felt holy. A woman in the audience wiped her tears. Heidi covered her heart. Sophia whispered something to Howie, but her voice broke too much to finish the sentence. Simon cleared his throat, struggling to steady his emotions. She would be proud, he said, voice cracking. You didn't just sing for her. You brought her here. You gave her this moment. The performer finally lifted his head fully, revealing a small, heartbreaking smile. Thank you, he said. That's all she ever wanted. The crowd erupted again, louder, longer, more emotional than before. It wasn't applause anymore. It was gratitude. As he walked off the stage, he didn't look triumphant. He looked fulfilled. He had kept his promise. And in doing so, he had touched millions.